Okay, so you know how sometimes you read something and it just kind of sticks with you? Like you put the book down, but you can't shake it?
Absolutely.
Well, listeners sent in this excerpt from Camus's The Fall, and it's like
Oh, yeah, The Fall. It's one of those books.
it gets under your skin.
Definitely does.
And the excerpt focuses on this character, Jean-Baptiste Clémence.
Clémence.
So we're doing a deep dive into this excerpt today.
Sounds fascinating.
He's in this dimly lit bar in Amsterdam, right? Rain's pouring outside.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And he's telling this story, but it's not just any story.
Right.
It's like a confession, but also a performance.
Oh, interesting.
And he keeps calling himself a judge penitent.
Oh, what now?
Judge penitent. Yeah, it really struck me.
That's a new one.
It's like he's both the judge and the one being judged.
Yeah, wow. That's Camus for you. Always messing with your head.
Right. So how do we even begin to unpack this whole judge penitent thing?
Well, I think it's all about this tension that Clemens embodies. You know, he's grappling with this intense guilt.
Yeah, he talks about this incident in his past where he failed to help someone.
Exactly. And that's where the penitent part comes in. He's haunted by this feeling of responsibility.
But he also has this need to be in control, to be above it all.
Exactly. And that's where the judge comes in. He wants to be the one who decides who's guilty, who's innocent.
It's like he's created this role where he can pass judgment on himself and others, almost like he's trying to control how he's perceived.
Absolutely. And there's this quote that really gets at that. He says, I have to have my vengeance. I have to be the one who punishes, since I am the one who can be condemned.
Wow, yeah. It's like he's saying, I'll judge myself before anyone else can.
Right. And that's where that unsettling laughter he keeps mentioning comes into play, I think.
The laughter.
Yeah, he keeps describing this laughter that he hears at these key moments. And it's like this constant reminder of the tension within him. He knows how absurd this whole judge penitent thing is, but he can't escape it.
It's like a crack in his facade.
Exactly.
Like he's trying to maintain this image of control, but the laughter betrays something deeper.
Right, and that's what makes Clemens such a compelling character. He's so aware of his own contradictions, but he can't help but play into them.
And then there are these moments where he describes doing these good deeds, you know, helping a blind man cross the street, giving up his seat on the train.
Yeah, but even those acts are tinged with this weird sense of superiority.
Totally. He's like, look at me being such a good person.
Exactly. He even says he feels irresistible when he helps the blind man, which is such a loaded word.
It's like his acts of charity are all about power and control.
Exactly. It's not about genuine compassion. It's about feeling superior to those he's helping.
So we've got this guy, Clemence, right? He's a judge penitent. He's obsessed with control and judgment, and he gets off on feeling morally superior to others.
And he's telling us all of this in this really deliberate way.
Right, because it's not just what he's confessing, it's how he's confessing it.
Is
Like,
that-
he even admits at one point, I cultivate my originality so as not to be devoured by the banality of our confessions.
Which is such a Camus line.
Totally. So is
Yeah.
he really trying to be honest, or is this whole confession just another performance?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Because on one hand, he's spilling his guts, holding nothing back.
But on the other hand, he's so carefully crafting the way he tells his story.
Like he's a lawyer presenting a case trying to control how we see him.
Exactly. And that's where Camus really gets you thinking about the nature of confession itself. Can any confession truly be genuine?
Or are we all just playing parts on a stage, putting on a show for each other?
It makes you wonder how much of what we present to the world, even in our most vulnerable moments, is truly authentic.
It's a bit unsettling when you think about it.
It is, but it's also deeply human, this need to connect, to be understood, but also to control how we're perceived.
You know, there's this other detail in the excerpt that really stood out to me, the stolen panel from an altarpiece.
Oh, yeah, the Just Judges?
Yeah, that's the one. It seems kind of random at first, but I feel like Camus wouldn't just throw something like that in there.
No way, not Camus. Every detail is so deliberate.
So what's the deal with this stolen panel? Why is it significant?
Well, for me, it gets at this whole idea of justice, which is so central to Clemence's whole thing, you know, with the judge penitent thing.
Right, like, is true justice even possible?
Exactly, and that's what this missing panel represents, is like this void, this absence of true justice in the world.
And the fact that it's hidden in Clemence's closet, like he's possessing this stolen justice.
Exactly. It's like a physical manifestation of his own internal struggle with guilt and judgment.
It's like he's trying to control justice itself by keeping it hidden away.
Totally. And there's this line where he says, perhaps I'm mistaken about the panel. Perhaps it's been peacefully hanging in a church for years, and it's only a reproduction I have. But what does that matter?
It's like he's admitting he could be wrong, but then he just brushes it off like it doesn't even matter.
And that's what's so fascinating about Clements. He's constantly questioning himself, doubting his own perceptions, but then he always circles back to reinforce his own narrative.
It's like he's more interested in maintaining his own version of reality than in actually confronting the truth.
Exactly, and that's what makes him such a compelling but also frustrating character.
Totally. So we've got this stolen panel representing this absence of true justice, and then there's Clements with his self-imposed role as judge penitent, trying to fill that void but also profiting from it in a way.
Exactly. It's like he's trying to become the embodiment of justice, but it's all built on this foundation of guilt and deception.
And the setting of the excerpt kind of adds to that whole feeling, this dimly lit bar, the rain outside.
It's like we're trapped in there with him.
Exactly. It's claustrophobic, secretive, like we're in on this confession, but it's also kind of suffocating.
Totally. And that's Camus's genius. He creates this atmosphere that mirrors Clements' internal state, this feeling of being trapped by his own guilt and his need to confess.
And it makes me think about us as readers. We're drawn into this confession. We're listening to Clements' story, but are we part of the problem?
That's the question Camus wants us to ask ourselves. Are we complicit in this cycle of judgment and confession?
It's like we're all in that bar together trying to make sense of our own guilt and our own need for redemption.
And Camus doesn't give us any easy answers. He leaves us to wrestle with these questions on our own.
So this Clements guy, he calls himself a judge penitent, right?
Right.
But is he really looking for redemption?
That's the question, isn't it?
Because the more he talks about his guilt, the more I wonder if it's just a way to make himself feel superior.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, look at how terrible I am, but at least I'm honest about it, unlike all of you.
Exactly. Like, he's found a loophole where self-condemnation equals absolution.
Totally. By preemptively judging himself, he's trying to shut down any judgment that might come from others.
And it's working, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing about Clements. He's so good at drawing you into his world, making you complicit in his little game.
It's like we're back in that bar in Amsterdam.
Trapped with him, listening to his confession.
But also kind of judging him at the same time.
And that's what Camus is so brilliant at. He implicates the reader in this whole dynamic of judgment and guilt.
It's like he's holding up a mirror and saying, hey, you're in this too. You're not so different from Clements.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us? Are we all doomed to this cycle of judgment and self-deception?
I don't think Camus is trying to give us a definitive answer.
More like he's giving us something to think about.
Exactly. He's challenging us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in.
Because maybe there aren't any easy answers when it comes to guilt and redemption.
Maybe it's more about asking the tough questions than finding the right answers.
Like Clements says, we are all judges, and we are all guilty.
It's a line that really stays with you.
It does. So what's the takeaway here?
I think it's about recognizing those moments when we're playing the judge penitent ourselves.
When we're more interested in controlling how others see us than in actually confronting our own flaws.
Exactly, because it's easy to get caught up in that cycle of judgment and self-justification.
But maybe true freedom comes from breaking free from that.
From accepting that we're all flawed, and that's okay.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive.
That has.
Lots to think about.
Definitely.
If you're listening and this conversation has piqued your interest, I highly recommend checking out The Fall by Albert Camus.
Yeah, it's one of those books that really stays with you long after you finish reading it.
And that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive, getting under the surface of things and exploring the complexities of the human experience.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.
And remember, sometimes the most important questions are the ones that don't have easy answers.